I often wonder how and why I became an artist. I think it started from just pursuing an interest in drawing, really. I could draw very well from an early age, and then I just followed that. I'm just always thinking up ideas, and I'm just really a really curious person. I like to just follow through with them and see what happens if I do X, you know. In Melbourne Now, I've created a work called You, Me and the Flock, and it's a 20 metre by 3 metre curved panorama. It's a series of shots made into one image that I've taken in a salt pan out near Mildura. And participants come along and they're given a sticker sheet of bird silhouettes, and they place them wherever they want, on the sky or the land, wherever. And as they do so, and as the crowds flock through, it auto-generates a drawing, a flock, and people leave their mark. And what's really been interesting about it is how it'll start as very free kind of patterns, and then as it becomes more crowded, people look for a space to claim for themselves, and then as they start crossing over, all hell breaks loose. So while it is a child's game and something that can be enjoyed by anyone, it also is a rumination on overpopulation and how we treat the environment.
I think Melbourne Now is important to the general community in particular because it's a celebration of contemporary culture, and it's been done in such a way that people don't even realise they're looking at contemporary art, but they are, and they're really enjoying it. The installation is called A Poetic Engagement in Reproduction. It's essentially a room. On one side of the room there is a combination of works that are both mine and historical works, and all of those works are one-off pieces of work that are made by hand. The Ballet Lab blanket that's on display is no less than 50 hours of intense work of weaving. That doesn't include setup and design. That's just straight out hardcore sitting there and weaving. I wanted to do another piece like that, and I wanted to do it specifically in the public domain so that how those pieces of ribbon got into the cloth became very visible. I think there's often no connect between how a design gets onto fabric in the public mind and in my work. That's very important because all the designs that go on fabric are original pieces of artwork to begin with, and there's a certain amount of investment of time and of process, and that process is also linked to technical innovation. So to have that in the public eye and create awareness and connection was really important to me.
There's a sort of internal logic over many years that's developed around that. You know, in a sense, you're just in your own head a lot of the time. When you're collaborating with other people, you are taken out of that and you're challenged by the ways that the people you are collaborating with interact with your work, how they might, I suppose, at times go straight over the top of what you've done, how they might alter for you the meaning by what they've introduced. The works in Melbourne Now are 3 Duraclear pictures that have had hand-painted marks and images applied over the top. So Duraclears are essentially a photographic format. It's a way of printing out a photographic image. The photographic part of the work was made by Charles Green and Lyndall Brown, who are my collaborators in this project. They are a husband and wife team, and like myself, they were invited to be official artists for the Australian War Memorial. So they were sent to Iraq and Afghanistan with the Australian Defence Forces, and I was sent to Timor-Leste. And in that situation, you're embedded with the soldiers and you have an experience with them and you utilise that experience however you want. We all felt that there was more work to be had out of that, and by degrees we formed this idea that maybe the work could be collaborative, that we didn't necessarily have to talk about the experience of being in Iraq or Afghanistan or the experience of being in Timor-Leste, but that what perhaps we could deal with was the experience of the aftermath of conflict and ways of kind of attending to the possibilities that come out of conflict. Those, obviously a lot of those are negative possibilities, but we wanted to formulate a way of addressing some of those things through the making of visual work. The three of us were not really interested in being didactic. We were interested in a kind of bricolage approach of bringing images in from all over the place and playing with them.